This What's Working with Cam Marston podcast is brought to you courtesy of First Horizon Bank.
Hi, I'm Tabitha Scott, a human dynamics expert and the host of Bucket Listening, brought to you by First Horizon Bank. I hope you will join me as I sit down with people from all walks of life to learn how their passions, insights, and persistence have helped them turn their bucket list into a beautiful life.
Tune in on your preferred platform or visit firsthorizon.com/podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. Thank you so much for joining us on today's show. What's Working is the show designed to uncover the workforce, the workplace, and the marketplace trends that are shaping the workforce, the workplace, and the marketplace around us. Our goal is to find guests that can help us with the trends in such a way that we can learn from them and do something, make ourselves a little bit better at whatever it is that we do. Again, welcome. The show now is in its sixth season, and when you're in 6 seasons, you begin to have guests back and to get the next chapter of their lives and the things that they've done. Some of the guests that have come back are continuing to grow and develop their current business. Others are into their second business, and others still maybe into their third. They are serial, let's say, starters or entrepreneurs, and that's going to be our guest today. I think he's actually on his second business since he and I talked. He took a hiatus and took a volunteer role in a period of time, and I'll give you detail on each of that. But one of the reasons I've wanted him back on the show is to learn why he's developed the interest in the business that he has, that he's currently in. His name is Brent Barkin. He's a native of the Deep South here in Mobile, Alabama. His family, and we'll touch this when we get him on the show after the break, his family, his father was the one that developed a company down here called Shoe Station. And the last I talked to Brent, I want to say 9 locations. It may be many more than that. I hesitate to commit to that number. They were bought out last year, and Brent took a hiatus, and he's now back into the work world. And the impression that I got when I talked to him about it was that he had time to pick and choose what he wanted to do. And when we get Brent in the studio here in a moment, we'll learn that Brent doesn't make quick decisions. He's a very studious and thoughtful guy. And we're going to learn what trends in the marketplace he's seeing that made him choose the business that he did. And I take his advice and his thoughts very seriously, and it'll be interesting to hear his thought process on what got him into what he's doing now. It's interesting. Most people, and I raise my hand right here, do not have the luxury to take 12 months, 18 months off from working and figure out what the next job may be. We're in the constant struggle. I don't have enough time, nor enough cash flow, nor enough different sources of cash flow just to take 18 months and stop and reconsider what my future may be. So it'll be interesting to hear how he thought about it, what he did with his time during 18-month hiatus where he was previously working 40, 60, 80 hours a week at the family business and running that show. So Brent Barkin, when we get back from break, again, he's a guest on the show for the third time. And it was interesting, the first time Brent was on the show, he and I were talking about the new line of products that was coming into Shoe Station, and he was a little bit nervous because, and this was in, let's say, February of 2020. And he said, Cam, there's this flu-like thing that's going on over in China, and so much of the inventory from our vendors is manufactured in China. The truth is, we're not really sure when we're going to get the spring line. And it's more than just a small case of the flu that's running through the nation. They seem to think it's something a bit larger than that. So we're a little bit worried about when the inventory was coming in. What was Brent talking about at the time? Brent was talking about the coronavirus and how it began there, and it was beginning to rear its ugly head in his shipments. Little did we know that it had perhaps crossed the oceans in the Northwest and was moving its way across the world. Pretty interesting story there. So anyway, Brent Barkin when we get back. Folks, a couple of things before we go to the break. You want to find this show and listen to the podcast of previous shows. I hope you will. Go to whatsworkingcam.com. Again, whatsworkingcam.com. There you'll find all the shows as well as links to how to get these shows on your favorite podcast sites. You can email me directly from that site. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you've got somebody that needs their story told, and send me their information. Let me do my research on them. You can also find the show on social media, and we are primarily Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. I know there's a gajillion others, but those are the ones we focus on, where you can see some behind-the-scenes stuff of what we're doing and what we're thinking about doing in the future. Also, very excited about the spread of the show in new markets. We're now in 10 markets, 2 of which are outside the state of Alabama, and that's going to become the norm. We'll be right back with Brent Barkin. You're listening to What's Working.
This is Seth Cherniak, Vice President of Branch Development for the Jeffrey Matthews Financial Group. If you're an experienced financial advisor wanting the freedom of independence but aren't sure making that jump is right for you, we should talk. Jeffrey Matthews has developed a successful program for advisors who don't want to be 1099 contractors and don't want to pay for their own overhead. We're looking for advisors who want the freedom to run their business the way they see fit, with the support that comes with a W-2 firm. If you're interested in joining one of our branches, or if you want to open your own branch as a full-time employee, let's chat. Our compensation plan is one of the most competitive among all W-2 firms, big or small. Reach out to us today at jeffreymatthews.com, connect with me, Seth Cherniak, on LinkedIn, or click the link in the podcast.
Jeffrey Matthews Financial Group, member FINRA, SIPC. We're back. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. I promised a good show, and I'm going to make good on the promise. Sitting across from me in the studio today, Brent Barkin. This is his 3rd time on the show. I'm not sure we've had anybody on the show 3 times. But in the short time that I've known Brent over the past 3 years, Brent, you've had a number of different roles. You've made a number of interesting career decisions, and I want to walk with you through those career decisions and learn why you've chosen the one that you're in today. You're currently with Stoic Equity Partners based in Daphne, Alabama. We'll hear more about that momentarily. Brent, thanks for your time. Welcome back to What's Working.
It's always fun to be here. It's like an old shoe. Just put it right back on.
And let's start with that. Shoe Station was the former business, the family business. You're the 2nd generation CEO of Shoe Station until it sold about 18 months ago. Am I right?
About right.
To Shoe Carnival.
Correct.
Which gave you the wonderful opportunity to kind of, and this is what I want this show to be about, look around, kick the tires, figure out what interests you, figure out what part of the marketplace you could be good at, figure out, what to do next. So let's do this. Let's go back 18 months and talk about your transition out of Shoe Station, a little bit what that was like, what surprised you about it, and then we'll get into what came next after that. So 18 months ago, let's pick it up there.
Yeah, sure. So 18 months ago, we sold Shoe Station to Shoe Carnival. We had me and my family had kind of decided that, hey, this was a very good opportunity for us to kind of move along. We get along much better as siblings that don't co-own a shoe store chain than we did as siblings that did. So I was able to have the opportunity after that to work for Shoe Carnival. Signed on, great opportunity, learned a lot. It was a lot different from being in a company that did $100 million to be in a company that does $1 billion.
Yeah.
And just to see that scale and to see the decisions that we would make on a daily basis, and you can make them on a whim, make them not, but the thought and the planning, the intensity that would go into those kind of conversations.
So remind me, I was trying to remember this a moment ago. Shoe Station, when it sold, had how many different stores?
We had 21 at the time, right around 500 employees.
I thought it was either 9 or 19. It's 21. I was wrong on both accounts, and 500 employees.
That's right.
In how many states?
We were in 5 states at the time.
And I remember when I first interviewed you about this, how fascinating I thought the trends were in different markets. So you may have a store in Louisiana and something's hot there that isn't hot here. Anyway, I don't want to go back into that. That's fascinating, but that podcast is out there. So you tell me about the transition out of being the CEO of a 2nd generation family into being an influencer within Shoe Carnival. but not being the big boss. What were the surprises there?
Right. Definitely different, right? So you go from being the guy in the room that everybody's, whether you like it or not, looking at you, looking for you to make a decision at any given moment, to being somebody that's, we were always on a team, but you're definitely part of a team, and somebody else is making the decisions. That was I knew it was coming. I was actually at some point, and we can get into this, it really didn't bother me. I think psychologically that was part of the reason we wanted to be able to sell. The reason I wanted to be able to sell was to kind of remove myself from some of those tough decisions. I mean, you and I talked about it. We went through it together with COVID, right?
Yeah. Oh,
so,
yeah.
I mean, I would say for anybody who is the CEO of a company, that was a very challenging, very interesting, obviously very upsetting, very stressful time. And when you were out on the tail end of that, there were a lot of times where you just didn't necessarily want to be the decision maker in a room.
Are you a team player?
I think I am. I'd like to believe I am. I would like to say, I guess I am saying that when you take that little bit of ego out, where you start seeing, okay, how are these conversations going? When you've been in that leading role, you still have to watch that second guessing inside your head. Well, hold on, he shouldn't have said that. He shouldn't be going that way. But if you really kind of buy into the mindset, and I did, and it helped that I had a very good CEO to work for, and somebody who really welcomed that input.
What did you learn about yourself as you left being the CEO? What was your title with Shoe Carnival?
Yeah, so I was the SVP of New Business Development and Integration.
What did you learn about yourself in that transition?
I really found that I liked, we had always traveled, I wouldn't say an extensive amount in my previous role. So we would go to shoe shows, we would go travel around and look at various stores. But I would say almost embarrassingly for somebody almost 50 years old, there were a lot of states I'd just never set foot in.
Really?
Oh yeah. Never been to Kentucky, never been to West Virginia, barely if ever been to Tennessee, never been to Ohio, or maybe we drove through it, I think, years and years before. For my mother went to Ohio State. Maybe we drove through it 30, 40 years ago. Never been to Indiana. So, I mean, that was an interesting thing. We're going to those areas and really, for looking at acquisition targets in particular and looking at new store locations, you're driving into and through small towns and airports. It's kind of, you don't know what you don't know. So just kind of the ignorance that, that's, I guess what I woke myself up to was that level of ignorance about, how, it sounds trite, but how beautiful the Ohio River Valley is.
Right.
And I was driving back and forth over, numerous bridges to go down the same road where you were like, okay, now I'm in Ohio. I'm in now I'm in West Virginia. So that was interesting. And I found out, despite being away from my family and my kids, that I really enjoyed that. I was able to do it in kind of small snippets.
Yeah.
So you get in a plane, you're there and gone for a couple of days, then you're back. And just drive through and kind of wake up to, all the differences that that collectively exist in our world that we just don't know about.
I appreciate someone who travels and recognizes that they're in someplace different and unique, and they're appreciating it. And I'll tell you a quick story, or else I got off the airplane in Salt Lake City. Let's see, it was Sunday. Yeah, Sunday. And the guy that drove the Uber from the airport to the hotel said, "So where are you from?" And I said, "Mobile, Alabama." He said, "I've never heard of the place." I said, Mobile is not the biggest city in the world, but most people have heard of it, particularly if they live in the U.S. He said, "Nope, never heard of it." "Where is it?" "It's in the southern part of the state on the Gulf." He said, "Oh, so you must be near the border." And I went, "The border of what?" I don't know what he's talking about, but I don't want to know anymore.
That's right.
I just buttoned my lip. Anyway, he later admitted to saying, "I've never really been much places outside of Salt Lake." I'm like, yeah, I can guess that. All right. So you transitioned from this role with Shoe Carnival. No. Simultaneously, you were very involved in the local Chamber of Commerce.
Right.
Tell me about that.
So I got on the local Chamber of Commerce, and you and I were just kind of reminiscing and discussing it, and had that opportunity to join the board. And that's been just a real kind of wake up call in education. And it started with a good friend of mine, Matt White, who was the vice chair at the time. And because of shoe station and doing various buildings and construction. He was like, well, let's walk through the chamber building, and maybe we're talking about renovating, and maybe there's some insight that you could get. So I guess it's one of those things I could have shut my mouth and I wouldn't have been offered it, but walk through the building. Oh, maybe we could do this. Maybe we could do that. And I learned later that Matt was kind of like, oh, okay, hey, let's get this guy more involved.
Yeah.
So they offered for me to be the chair after Matt was the chair, and had a great time and Matt really started this whole process of having the vice chair get a lot more involved. And I've worked through that with our next vice chair, Melissa Cross, and said, let's really look at this as kind of a multi-year sort of really study of what goes on in the chamber, understanding of the chamber. And as you and I were talking about, the Mobile Chamber doesn't just do one thing. It does a ton of things.
And it was in that time with the chamber that I know you had your fingers in a lot of pots and got to choose where you would land next, or at least figure out where your expertise would be applied next. And I want to hear how you made that selection when we come back from break. Before the break, folks, I want to remind you about First Horizon Bank's podcast called Bucket Listening. It's for CEOs, it's for C-level people that are wondering how to pursue their bucket list before retiring. Why wait till retirement to pursue your bucket list? First Horizon began the podcast not long ago in order to interview some of the people that they've encountered through their bankers that are really living a life worth envying. It's called the Bucket Listening Podcast, and you can find it on any of the major podcast sites, produced by First Horizon and narrated by a woman named Tabitha Scott, who's really quite good at what she does. When we come back from break, more from Brent Barkin and why he chose what he chose as his new career. You're listening to What's Working. We'll be right back. Customer service never goes out of style. In fact, I think it's safe to say that customer service is more valuable and more important now more than ever. Hi, this is Cam Marston. One thing that my over 200 episodes of What's Working has taught me is how important customer service is to building and maintaining a thriving business. It's the growing need for customer service that's led me to partner with one of the state's leading customer service trainers to create our program called Delivering 5-Star Customer Service. Your team will get one 90-minute training session per month for 6 consecutive months. Each session builds on the skills learned the previous month, allowing your customer-facing teams to practice before moving on to the next lesson. And the 6 lessons address everything from appearance to electronic communications to conflict resolution to maintaining a service mindset. Our program travels and is delivered in person at your workplace, nothing virtual. You simply can't practice the level of the skills this course teaches virtually. For more information, email me, cam@cammarston.com, and let's schedule a time to talk. Remember, you have less to fear from outside competition than you do from discourtesy and bad service from inside your own company. Again, email me, cam@cammarston.com, and let's talk about your business. I'm sitting across from Brent Barkin. He is the newest partner of Stoic Equity Partners in Daphne, Alabama. He was previously the CEO of his family's company called Shoe Station until they sold out to Shoe Carnival about 18 months ago. After a short stint with Shoe Carnival, he went out on his own, I guess, or left Shoe Carnival after the contract, his commitment had expired. Had a lot of hands and a lot of pots as the chair of Mobile Chamber of Commerce, which allowed you to meet a lot of people, hear about the trajectory of growth of this region as any Chamber of Commerce would do. Tell me, Brent, what did you see in that role that stood out to you that made you say, hey, this might be something I want to pursue?
Yeah. So, earlier in the previous segment, we were talking about kind of what I learned from travel. And that was kind of that I would say the word ignorant of places, but didn't know how little I knew about different places. This was really how little I knew about various people and, various people, various groups, what's going on in this city. And this is really something I'm sure your listeners always contend with, is recognizing, if you really think about it, how little you know about your own community if you're really paying attention. And, I'll do it quickly. We go every year on a chamber trip. It's called the Leaders Exchange, and you go to a different city. You try to learn kind of some main cool things about those cities. We've been to Tampa, we've been to Charleston. We're going to Salt Lake City this next trip. So on that trip, because I was going to be the chair, I made a list, and I'm never this intentional about things, but I was like, I'm going to be intentional. I don't know all these people. I'm about to be the chair. I made a list of everybody on the trip. And I said, I'm going to have one meaningful conversation with each person.
How many people are there? Give me a sense of this
100.
challenge.
There were about
my
100
gosh.
people.
I haven't had 100 meaningful conversations in my life.
Well, no, I try. But, so 100 people, 3 days roughly. And I said, it can't be, to myself, it can't just be, how's breakfast? How did you sleep?
Right.
And I wanted it to be organic. And the good news is I wasn't trying to sell anybody anything, get anything. It's just, if you open yourself up, and that's kind of my point, is really opening yourself up to who is this person? What do they do? How did they get into that? That sort of, it's almost like I learned a lesson about human interaction, right? It's be honestly interested in who you're talking to and what they have to tell you. Mm-hmm. And then by doing that, you're going to learn more about them. And by doing that, maybe you learn more about yourself and what you like to do and what you might not like to do. And as we were talking, because of, my thought of a potential eventual exit from Shoe Carnival at that time.
Yep.
How's this going to open my eyes to what else is out there? So that's the one thing I really kind of learned through my role in the chamber, was having those meaningful conversations, trying to meet as many people as possible. And that was roughly 100 people. What I also learned, which was nice, was about, a good handful, half dozen or so of the people who worked at the chamber. So I really didn't know some of those people. They were on my list. I didn't necessarily pick up that they were at the chamber at the time. So I got to meet them and to understand and what Carolyn has done. And she's been with the organization for something like 20 years. And she works in the membership office, and never would have had that conversation if I hadn't thought about having those conversations. And I'm thinking to myself how silly that was. Why don't people do that every day? So then when I came back, I really tried to do that for the first few months, was also looking through the people that might not have been on the trip, but the major players in the city, people who run APM terminals, the port, the airport authority. And to really, the ignorance of, well, what does the port do? I mean, you're allowed to ask that. I mean,
right.
I know boats come in and they go out, but how many boats? What does that mean? What does that entail? Able to learn a lot about the city by doing that.
So you met a lot of people that you didn't know. I love it that you made diligent efforts to have intentional conversations with these people. And there's perhaps a script playing in the back of your mind going, I got time to figure out what I'm going to do next. I'm too young to not work anymore. Right. I got to find a purpose. My wife will kick me out. My kids will stop liking me if I'm around all the time. Right. So you had at some point to say, what do I want to apply my skills to do? Is there something you learned in these intentional conversations that you at some point said, I think my skills would be very valuable doing this?
I think it was almost that I recognized that my skills lent themselves pretty well to that kind of networking, that there was, if there is a value in making those connections and being able to walk into a room and know the people, genuinely know the people in the room, who they are, what they do. And maybe that was kind of the seed that kind of got inside in my head that goes, okay, well, how do I then translate this knowledge and this fact that now that I, have these connections with various people, and is there some way that I can play that? I mean, at some point I did think, well, I could go into business consulting. How could I do that? And I wanted to find some kind of role that would still allow me to be local. That was one thing, by having that time where I could travel, and then come back. I was still working remotely from home, versus from the office and being at the office every day and doing that 70 hours a week. So I really did see the value in seeing my wife more and seeing my kids more and being at home. Yeah. So I wanted something where I could have that human connection, but still kind of be really home based.
I used to travel a lot more than I do. And it was at some point, maybe 6-7 years ago, that I said, I live in Mobile, but I don't really find this place home. I live in an airport. I live in hotel rooms, and I don't really know anybody in the city. I have some friends, but I made the conscious decision to begin getting involved. And it's one of the things that began this radio show, is this will allow me to meet people, and people will answer my call when I say, hey, would you like to be on the show? And there's another guy who's been on the show who I like a lot named T. Bruce McKinnon. He's very much the same. He's got this Bay Business News thing that comes out every Friday that promotes what's going on in the city. And he told me one of the reasons he began it is that he lives on the road and wanted to feel connected to his community. And it's exploded. So you wanted to choose something that would allow you to maintain the connections in the community that you had begun with the chamber event. And how did it lend itself to Stoic Equity Partners? So let's perhaps begin with, what is Stoic Equity Partners?
Sure. So Stoic Equity Partners is, and in its current form, is a group of people, started by Grant Reeves and Jeremy Friedman, that are actively looking in acquiring commercial real estate. Mm-hmm. And then, so they look at these pieces of property, and it began as various self-storage units, those sorts of things. And it's morphed into really a focus on what they call flex industrial. We'll get to what that is.
Yeah.
It's not a factory. But they were looking at these value plays where they would find these good opportunities, work them, clean them up, do value add with them, and basically make them worth more than what they were, with an exit strategy of eventually selling them. So part of the way I got connected with them is somebody that I was introduced to through 68 Ventures and Nathan Cox, friend of theirs. He'd worked with them in the past. And, as you do when you get into an exit strategy like we had, you have resources to deploy. I mean, that was one of the main things I was looking for if I was going to retire or going to have a different relationship with myself and my wife and my kids, where I could actually be at home, was how do I replace the income, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to do that. And at the same time, I wanted to put my money to work where I wasn't going to run out and buy the most expensive boat or a silly car or just something stupid.
Right.
I didn't have the personality type to do that, but I also didn't want to learn that I had the personality type to do that.
Didn't want to tempt it.
Right. Oh, I'll buy this because I can. So, it started out as looking for ways to put my money to use and to get a good return. And at the same time as this was happening, I was getting offers from different people. Hey, we'd like to kind of have you interested in working with us. So Grant and Jeremy had brought that up a few months back. And I think that was kind of early in my, post Shoe Carnival career, where I was saying, well, as to your point, let me think about this for a little while.
Right.
What exactly do I want to do? And, the more I thought about it over the summer, post-summer, especially after the kids get back in school, you got a little more free time to sit and less time to play with your kids. And my wife and I love playing tennis together, but, I can be at the house. When you're at the house for, 10 hours bouncing back and forth, you have a lot of time to think. So I said, well, this is something I'm personally invested in. I understand it. I know why I did it. I can talk about it.
So I want to hear, when we come back from break, what the skill set that you identified as your time in the chamber and how it lends itself exactly to what you're going to be doing with Stoic Equity Partners. Because I think there are people out there that are saying, I have understood these skills that I have. It's taken a while for me to realize what they are. How can I deploy them in the best way possible to the benefit of me, my family, my community, whatever it may be? It's really, how do I maximize my talents? And we'll get back into that when we get back from break. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. We'll be right back.
This is Seth Cherniak, Vice President of Branch Development for the Jeffrey Matthews Financial Group. If you're an experienced financial advisor wanting the freedom of independence, but aren't sure making that jump is right for you, we should talk. Jeffrey Matthews has developed a successful program for advisors who don't want to be 1099 contractors and don't want to pay for their own overhead. We're looking for advisors who want the freedom to run their business the way they see fit, with the support that comes with a W-2 firm. If you're interested in joining one of our branches, or if you want to open your own branch as a full-time employee, let's chat. Our compensation plan is one of the most competitive among all W-2 firms, big or small. Reach out to us today at jeffreymatthews.com, connect with me, Seth Cherniak, on LinkedIn, or click the link in the podcast.
Jeffrey Matthews Financial Group, member FINRA, SIPC. We're We're back. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. In the studio today, Brent Barkin sits across from me. This is the third time he's been on the show. His career has taken a remarkable trajectory since he and I met years ago, and currently partner within Stoic Equity Partners. And Brent, prior to the break, what is the skill set that you learned about yourself since the exit from Shoe Carnival to the beginning of Stoic Equity Partners, where you said, first, I have the resources to join this group as a partner, and second, I could be good at it because fill in the blank.
Right. So I think when you get to a situation where you're making honest connections with people, and I think ultimately when you're in a situation where you're basically looking at raising capital, you have to know people well enough that you're not just a snake oil salesman, right? So that it helps when you're doing something you believe in. I think the other side is that the people that you're reaching out to, you actually know. So I think I'd like to believe that by working in my other careers, but specifically I think through the chamber, and I recognize that I do feel like I have the ability to recognize, to have good, honest conversations with people that you make a connection with, that I would be able to then reach out to those people and say, hey, look, here's what I'm doing. This is something that you're interested in. If it's something that is in the field of what you're looking to invest in or you want to know more about, I'd love to have a conversation.
So you're selling. Is it safe to say that you're selling for the first time ever?
I sold shoes, but different.
You sold a lot of shoes.
Different kind of selling, right? So, I will say at some level it's relative to, I've done other kinds of, I make a connection with some fundraising. So, I'm doing some fundraising for a Broad Street Restoration Society in downtown Mobile. I've done United Way fundraising, reached out for some other fundraising.
So you've asked for the sale a number of times.
Asked for the sale, and in fact, in some ways, it's a little easier sometimes to ask for a sale where somebody can see the personal benefit, right? So it removes that. When you're selling a charity, you're selling a nonprofit organization. Sometimes it's a harder sale because you have to make people care first. Potentially.
So when you're selling now, you're asking people to contribute to investing in a building that can be upfitted. I don't know this terminology, but be changed and to be sold later for a greater amount.
That's right. So
they're looking for data. They're looking for P&L, but they're also looking into your soul to say, can I give this guy this money?
That's right. What's he doing with it? Is there a catch? What's the catch? And I think so many people are being used to sold to. And not having a conversation. If you start realizing what somebody's really looking for and it's not what they're looking for, there's no purpose in pushing that question or that conversation, right? So if you have a real understanding of somebody, you know where they are in life, you know what they're looking for, and it makes sense, you have a conversation with the person.
So is your primary role seeking revenue, seeking funds to go these purposes, or is your primary role to find the properties that can be upfitted?
No. Yeah, I'm not on the property side. So my primary role is helping make those connections and those introductions and basically educating those people about what Stoic does, specifically about what our new fund does. We're trying to raise $25 million.
So when you were exploring things through the chamber, was there something that you saw, a measurement, a report, a conversation that you had that said Mobile, Baldwin counties in this part of Southwest Alabama are on the verge of something? Therefore, these are investments that are going to pay off. This is part of the stirring the pot in the chamber that, something came to the top that made you say, these are my skills and this is the opportunity.
Yeah. And I would say it's even a little more broad than just this area. Certainly from what I've done at the chamber, I'm seeing just insane growth in Mobile County, Mobile in particular. From living in Baldwin, I've lived in Baldwin since 2018. It's a little easier to see it in Baldwin, right? I mean,
it's everywhere.
Oh, yeah. So you're driving down 181. I don't know if you used to. When I was a little kid, you drive down 181, there's nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, you could go from the interstate all the way down to Gulf Shores. My grandmother, we used to take vacation down there. And now it's just all over the place. Mobile's been kind of a little, almost like a soft brew, like it's just been bubbling on the side. But knowing what I know at the chamber, I mean, we're on the cusp of something this area hasn't seen in 50 years.
Let me play devil's advocate.
Sure.
So, and you got to recognize, let's make sure that the people listening are because there are people listening in Gadsville and Tuscaloosa and Auburn and Dothan and even Miles City, Montana. There's not a chamber of commerce out there that is going to say, yeah, our economic prospects are bleak.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wouldn't come here. This place is awful. We're about to roll up the streets and get out of town ourselves. So every chamber of commerce is responsible to say, this place is the next heaven. This place is the next Nashville, Austin, all these big. So my devil's advocate side says, well, of course the chamber said that. That's what they're paid to say. It's like they don't put out ads that are bad for the community. So react to that devil's advocate point of view.
Sure. Well, and I would say also from an investment side, I'm excited about the whole Southeast. And I'm not on the Southeast
Chamber of Commerce.
Right. But so from a Mobile specific side, it's the job growth. I mean, that's just the staggering point. I mean, going back into the early 80s, if you were down here, you had plenty of people looking for a job and not enough people hiring for jobs.
Right.
We have the opposite situation right now. So the employers that we have, whether it's an Austal and Airbus, but it's everywhere. It's the Austal, the Airbus, it's the port, it's a bunch of other industries are all actively hiring right now and can't get enough workers. So we're having to make connections with the high schools to really aggressively have these students recognize that there are these opportunities. So I would say it's the availability of opportunities for workers that to me is the distinct difference.
So it's that one factor. People are looking for employees so much. And you could also say then housing. I should have gotten into apartments or condos or house building.
That's right. So I think it's all those different things. So you get a situation where you have so many employers wanting to come to an area despite the fact that they're grabbing all the available workers, and you still have an underemployment rate. Kay Ivey was at an event and she was talking about
Kay Ivey, Alabama governor.
Thank you for your other listeners. Kay Ivey was speaking about the fact, and this was great politician comment about how low our unemployment rate was. And she said, our underemployment rate is still high. So the amount of workers in the workforce is still lower than it should be based on work age population. Mm-hmm. So there's your gap and there's your opportunity. So we have these people that are out there. They just have fallen out of the workforce because they don't see the opportunity. So it's literally not only is opportunity knocking, like the opportunity is banging down the door right now.
It's kidnapping. It's grabbing.
It's grabbing. It's the doors being banged down and knocked in, and people are saying, I want to hire you. So when you get into that situation, there's two ways out of it, right? People either have to, in that unemployment group, recognize the opportunity and we help move them into gainful employment, or other people are going to come down for areas where they can't find jobs and flow to the area where jobs are. Mm-hmm. So you have in either of those situations, and again, I'm not fighting your devil's advocate, but I hope I'm making the good counterpoint. In either of those situations, you either have an underserved population that hasn't experienced the rising tide that's going to, and or people from outside going to move in and bring their wealth and bring their opportunity and bring their knowledge with them.
So this, combined with your skill set, puts you in the hands, the partnership with Stoic Equity Partners. Real quick, we're coming to the close. How will you know you're successful there?
I would say if I show my value by making enough introductions to them, I think the fund sells itself. I mean, this is me, little salesmanship here, but I do think the fund sells itself. I mean, it shows a value proposition. It's an underserved area. There aren't enough of these properties. People should invest in them. But my success is going to be if I show enough investors to them that make the case.
And reach for their wallet, essentially.
Hope so. Write a check. We'll just take a check.
Brent, so maybe we have you back in 18 months and get the update. It seems like that's the trend.
We got a pattern. What's the upgrade after the mug? I like the mug.
I've given him a What's Working mug. I don't know. Maybe it's a T-shirt. Maybe it's a pen.
I like it. Let's do it.
Brent Barkin, we wish you the best. And I'm frankly grateful that you're sticking around. You've done wonderful things for our community. Hope you'll keep going.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right, my man. We'll be right back after this break with more What's Working. We'll get into segment 5, show recap, and what you can expect in upcoming episodes. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. We'll be right back. Do you have an industrial or commercial construction project you're ready to make a reality? Persons Services Corp is a diverse specialty contractor capable of tackling complex projects. They've won awards from Engineering News Record and the Association of General Contractors. If you're looking for a turnkey project management solution, advanced technologies, and skilled personnel you can trust, look no further than Persons Services Corp. Find out more at personsservices.com. So here's an interesting question for you. You know what you're good at now. You're, let's say, we'll use the demographics of the listeners of this show as typical. You're 45 years old or older, you're male, and you are in a position of influence in the business in which you're involved. 70% of the listeners are male. I don't want to discount the 30% that are female. But you're now in a position of... you know what your strengths are. You know what you're good at. And complementing that, you know what you like to do. And for many people, knowing their strengths and knowing what they like to do are often the same thing. They overlap in kind of a Venn diagram. They'll overlap on the two. If you know your strengths and you know what you like to do, what would you do if you had to get a new job? If you had to leave and find something else? Some tragic case, your business went out, something happened, you had to move, and you're not in a rush. You also have the savings, the ability to not have to hurry. What would you do? Where would you go apply your skills in a way that would pique your interest every day and make you want to continue to get better and better and better? By the way, we're back. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. Thank you. I'm always grateful to Brent Barkin for his insights. He comes well prepared. He's very thoughtful. And he's got a good story to tell. He understands the basics of a good story. So back to the conversation. What would you do? That's what Brent got to do, essentially. I'm sure there's some stress along the way. There always is. We never hear the worry. We never hear the anxiety. We never hear the fear and things like this because there's always going to be a little bit of it when you're stepping into something new. But I wonder what you would do. What would I do if I had the opportunity to do everything again? I know I'm good at some things. I know I'm good at asking questions, thoughtful questions. I know I'm good at giving presentations. And that's kind of one of the reasons that's one of the things that's driven me to this radio show, that and the fact that I like to meet people. I'm good at finding and enjoying meeting people, and it's led me here, but I still want to chew around with the question, what would you do? Anyway, a thought for a conversation down the road. Take it take your spouse to dinner one night and ask him or her that question. You could start all over. What are you good at? What do you enjoy doing? What excites you? And if you could combine those two things into what you do, what would it be? Let me know. I'm always curious about these things. We'll have another show next week. Let's see as I quickly look into the calendar of what will be coming up in What's Working, what we've got scheduled out there. I think it's going to be Kate Teague. Kate is a musician. She's from the Deep South. She's living in Nashville, and she's trying to break into the music scene in Nashville. And I want to know what that's like. Who do you have to meet? What do you have to know? Do you have to be a good guitarist or something, or is it vocals? I want to hear what that challenge is like and how long Kate's given herself to be successful. So Kate Teague will be next week. She's the daughter of a friend, and I learned what she's up to and thought this is a story that needs to be told. You're listening to What's Working. Thank you for tuning in. Find us on social media. Give us likes. Give us follows. Go find this podcast somewhere. You can go to whatsworkingcam.com, and you can find the podcast as well as the links to the other podcasts, etc. And you can go to those podcasts and find all the previous ones. Have a good week, everybody. As you likely know, this show originates as a radio show broadcast across the state of Alabama, and it continues to grow in both radio listeners and market. After it's formatted for radio, we then turn it into this podcast. Please share it with those you think would find it interesting, and subscribe to the podcast on my YouTube page where you can leave messages and your thoughts and your comments, and I'll certainly get back in touch. Finally, if you're a fan of the show, please offer a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can find my book called What Works on Amazon.com. In it, I highlight the top 10 ideas from the first 200 episodes of the show. Mind you, they're not the top 10 best episodes, they're the top 10 best ideas. Many times the same ideas are brought up again and again by different guests, and we dig into those ideas in such a way that they'll be easily applicable for your business. Simply go to Amazon and enter my name, and you'll find What Works as well as my other books. Chapter titles include How to Find a Niche, Innovation, Building Teams, and so forth. To learn more about the workshops and seminars I offer, go to cammarston.com. There you can view clips of my work, view workshop titles, view my reviews, case studies, customer lists. It's all there. If you'd like a free copy of one of the chapters of my book, enter your email address at the bottom of the homepage at cammarston.com. And from that site, you can email me directly. I always love to hear from you. You'll also find me on social media. Find Cam Marston on all the social media platforms, and you may need to enter the numeral 1. There's one other Cam Marston out there, and that numeral 1 distinguishes me from him from time to time. So if you're unsure if it's me or not, enter that numeral 1 after my name, and it should do the trick. On a more personal and less professional side, I record weekly commentaries that air across Alabama on Alabama Public Radio twice each day on Fridays called Keeping It Real. They've won statewide and national awards. They're simple observations on the world as it goes on around me, and they're only a few minutes long. They're a passion. You can find them on the same podcast app you're using to listen to this. Finally, if you're interested in advertising on this podcast or the radio show, reach out. I've worked hard to cultivate a specific listener, and I can tell you all about them, and I have many different options for helping you reach them. Thanks again for listening. We'll have another episode available soon.